but today we are making a spider cake, and I still can't tell if it's like the best or worst idea I've ever had, but I'm going to show you how I made it. So we start by sifting our dry ingredients into a large bowl, setting that aside, and then we're going to whisk together our wet ingredients. This chocolate cake recipe is my moist chocolate cake recipe. It's super straightforward, it can be made by hand, and it's so delicious. And then you're just going to pour those wet ingredients into your dry ingredients and whisk until smooth. We're then going to pour our cake batter into 6-inch dome cake pans, bake them up, and then let them cool before removing them from the pan. As long as you grease your pan properly, they should pop right out just like this. I also used a heating core to help the layers bake a little bit more evenly and quickly, so I gently removed that and then leveled the top of the cake layer. You want to be careful as you do this because obviously the bottom of the cake is not flat, it's curved, so it's going to wiggle a little bit as you cut, but if you take your time and use a nice sharp serrated knife, you should be good to go. I also recommend trimming the dome off of one of the rounded cake layers just so that it can sit nice and flat against your cake board as you assemble the cake. And then it's time to start assembling this cake. So we're going to use some buttercream on our cake board, like always, to secure that cake layer to our cake board. We're also building this on a 10-inch grease-proof cake board. Even though the cake layers are small, the legs are going to really stick out far, so we need a pretty big cake board to allow us to have enough room for that. We spread a nice thick layer of our dark chocolate buttercream onto our cake layer and then topped it with our second one. The next step is to cover the cake in a thick layer of the same frosting, and you want to be really careful as you do this, take your time, because the cake can be a little bit wiggly. If you're really struggling, you can always insert a wooden dowel into the center to help keep the layers in place, or you can pop the cake into the freezer for about 10 minutes before frosting it to help your layers kind of set and lock into place. I wanted to get my frosting super smooth, but you really don't have to because we're going to be covering this with piped buttercream and no one's going to really see what it looks like. Next, I'm piping on my spider's eyes, and I used a little circle cutter there just to give me kind of a guide to make sure both my eyes ended up the same size, and then I smooth them out just a little bit with a piece of acetate sheet to get them really nice and smooth. After adding on my black pupils, it's time to start piping our buttercream onto our cake. So I took my remaining black buttercream, I put it in a large piping bag fit with a large grass tip. This is a Wilton 234, and I'm just covering the entire cake with the frosting. Now this can take a little bit of time, so feel free to take breaks if you need it, or if your frosting bag gets too warm from your hand, you can always wrap a paper towel or a kitchen towel around the bag to minimize that transfer of heat from your hand into the frosting. Now our cake is really starting to come together, and it's time for the final step to add in our spider legs. I decided to keep things really simple and just use some black bubble tea straws or smoothie straws. I bent them in half, actually pressed them into a book and let them sit for about 20 minutes just so that they really kept their shape, and then I carefully pressed them into my cake. I put 4 on each side and kind of staggered them where they were lower in the front of the cake and kind of higher in the back. This makes this cake so much easier to make, so I really highly recommend using straws, but if you wanted to, you could also use fondant to make your legs. I ended up repositioning my legs a little bit, so I filled in the top area with a little bit more buttercream fur, and I added on a little smile so that everybody knew that our spider was a happy and nice spider.